Well, after the two people were killed on London Bridge on Friday evening, focus has understandably shifted to why a convicted terrorist was allowed out of prison early. The Prime Minister has confirmed that 74 people jailed for terror offences but released early will now have their licence conditions urgently reviewed. Usman Khan's lawyer, Vajahat Sharif, joins me now from central London. Thanks very much for being with us on Sky News this afternoon. When you heard the news that one of your clients was responsible, what went through your mind?
I was shocked. It was quite unexpected because immediately before his release, there was no indication that he still continued to hold any extremist ideology or have that kind of mindset.
How long ago, before Friday, did you speak to him?
My last contact with him was around February, March this year.
And what did you talk about in that conversation?
A very brief conversation about licensing conditions. Nothing significant.
What point was he making?
He was just querying some of his licensing conditions.
Yeah. Well, what were they exactly? Because we know that he had a tag on. What were the conditions surrounding his release?
I'm not aware of the entirety of his conditions, but there was issues about curfew and reporting to police stations.
And had you been aware that he was due to attend this conference? Obviously, you spoke to him some months earlier, so maybe it hadn't been arranged.
No.
Give me an idea, give me a sense of what sort of person he was. What was he like?
He was a very young man. When he was originally in custody following charge, he was 17 years old. He pleaded guilty when he was 19 years old. So effectively, he matured into an adult while in custody. He was released when he was 28. He seemed to, he clearly regretted his initial ideology and mindset. He rejected Islamic State and Qaeda ideology and the underlying thinking that led to his conviction. And when I spoke to him in October, November, immediately before his release, that was confirmed by him, and he was looking forward to being released.
So what on earth went wrong?
Well, often when offenders are released, terror suspects are released, they have some engagement with de-radicalisers, or also known as intervention providers, to ensure that any potential extremist mindset is addressed. My point is that this should start during the custodial element of the sentence while they're in custody before they're released on licence.
So you're saying that the rehabilitation that he should have been getting in prison didn't happen or wasn't good enough?
There was some element of conventional probation intervention. However, with ideological offenders, the situation is far more complex, as you'd appreciate. There are elements of political ideology which addresses the extremist views, but also underlying Islamic theology. And that is an extremely specialist area, and specialists need to get involved during the custodial element of the sentence. Several years, I feel, before the offender is released on licence, such that any concerns such as the underlying ideology, whether there are any residual continuing extreme views, they can be addressed, and also to address the safeguarding element for the public.
And given that you spoke to him not that long ago,
yes,
did any alarm bells ring with you? Did you feel that you wanted to speak to the authorities, speak to people who perhaps should have been in charge of monitoring him, say, look, I'm not happy about this?
I'm afraid my conversations were too brief and not of that nature.
We know he was linked to the extremists Anjem Choudhury, al-Muhajirun as well. Did he ever talk to you about that and whether he's still identified with some of their radical views?
No, it was clear he rejected those views.
But yeah, we know he was a very good actor as well, don't we? Because he was on this rehabilitation conference when he committed the atrocity.
Well, this is the thing. I feel strongly that had there been appropriate intervention during the latter part of his custody, which continued into the licensing period, perhaps this aspect could have been evolved. This may not needed to have happened, but whatever the reason why it didn't happen, I can't answer that.
Do you think he got an inappropriate sentence? Should he have stayed in prison longer?
Well, now you're questioning the underlying legal system. The fact is that we have a very good professional system which is highly regarded throughout the world. The prosecution and the defence robustly argue their points before objective and impartial judges with considerable experience. In my view, he received the correct sentence, the initial sentence perhaps, which was successfully appealed. The appeal judges properly considered the case. I think that it's wrong to argue that he received the wrong sentence. I think perhaps the focus should be placed more on understanding the underlying ideology while he was still in custody.
We know the Ministry of Justice is undertaking a review of 74 convicted terrorists, the licensing conditions of them. Have you other clients who have been convicted of terror offences who have now been released?
I've had several clients who have been convicted of terror offences, who've been successfully released into the community, who have been rehabilitated, who have had engagement with intervention providers, de-radicalisers, and their views have changed.
So what went wrong in Khan's case, do you think? I mean, you've touched on it already, but why didn't it work for him when it worked for other clients of yours?
I don't know what form of intervention he received, whether the person or the group of individuals were appropriately qualified. To make the point, and I've said already that this is a very highly specialised area, the probation service does an excellent job. They deal with conventional criminals and they're able to examine the underlying socio and economic conditions and perhaps address mental health issues. But the specialism required in this case is such that it can deal with extremist ideology and Islamic theology, which, with respect to the probation service, they may not be the appropriate resource to deal with that or address those issues.
We know the PREVENT strategy has been pretty controversial. What do you make of that, where experts go in and try and speak to young people before they go and commit atrocities?
In some cases, I'm aware it has been successful. Some interventions have been successful. But then again, it depends on the type of intervention and timing of it. There have also been reported many cases where there's been a clear misunderstanding and misidentification, and some distress has been caused to those who've been approached.
There has been criticism online of lawyers who defend terrorists.
Yes.
What's your response to that?
Well, this is one of the fundamental rights that we have, the right to a fair trial. And this is one of the rights living in a free and democratic society, where an individual who is charged with a very serious offence has a right to be properly represented. He or she can put forward whatever explanation or defence they want, and that explanation is put to an impartial and objective jury. It is properly tested by the prosecution. If the explanation or defence is found wanting, the individual is convicted and properly sentenced. But you need to have this critical adversarial approach to get the right answers. Our legal system is commended throughout the world as being both impartial and fair, and a model.
Have you spoken to Khan's family at all? What was his family background?
His family, his parents are first-generation Pakistani migrants. They are decent, respectable, hard-working people. The brothers, the siblings are all working hard, they're married. they, at the time of the original offence, they were shocked. They were shocked that he was involved in something like this.
And just finally, how did he get into this? What went wrong in his life, given everything you've said about his family, that made him go down this route?
Well, this specific incident I can't explain, I can't excuse. His original offending, when he was 17 years old, related to his association with al-Muhajirun. And there was an element of influence, or you could say grooming, by more senior people who he was surrounded by.